I still remember that siren as clearly as if it were yesterday, that metallic wail of warning and terror that tore through the peaceful morning in Hilo on March 15th of last year. I was sitting in my backyard garden then, tending to the forget-me-not flowers I'd been nurturing for 10 years. Those delicate little blooms with their 5 sky blue petals and golden centers always reminded me of my grandmother's stories about old Hawaii. Mom, David, my youngest son, came running from the house, his face pale as death. Tsunami warning. We have to go now. I looked toward the ocean. The water was receding in the strangest way, exposing sections of seabed I'd never seen in my 72 years of life. Small fish were flopping helplessly on the wet sand, confused about what was happening. But my flowers, I stammered, still holding the watering hose. Forget about the flowers. Mom, David grabbed my arm. We need to go now. And we ran. I ran on these 72-year-old legs, with my heart pounding against my ribs, stealing one last glance at our little oceanfront house, the place where David and I had lived peacefully for 15 years. Ever since my husband passed away, we ran uphill toward the safe zone, where hundreds of other Hilo residents were gathering. Then we turned back to watch. I've seen many things in my lifetime, but I'd never witnessed nature's power like that. Waves as tall as buildings crashed down like a massive wall of water, swallowing everything in their path. Our house, with its sun-faded wooden walls, the small kitchen where I cooked traditional Hawaiian meals, my beloved forget-me-not garden. Everything became floating debris in murky water within moments. Oh God, I whispered, holding David's trembling shoulders. When the water receded, nothing remained, just mud, unrecognizable fragments, and the stench of salt water mixed with destruction. Among those fragments, I found a small terracotta pot, cracked in half, still holding some soil and one wilted forget-me-not. Mom, David said, his voice choking, we'll rebuild. Don't worry. But how could I not worry? David was 45, working as a tour guide on the Big Island. After the tsunami, Hawaiian tourism plummeted. David lost his job, and we were left with only a meager savings account and home insurance that wouldn't cover rebuilding our lives. 2 weeks later, we were still living in a Red Cross relief tent. I watched David each night lying on his thin sleeping bag, staring at the tent ceiling with the expression of a man who didn't know how to care for his aging mother. I knew my son was suffering, not just from losing our home and his job, but from the helplessness of being unable to protect the mother he loved most. David, I said one evening, as rain pattered against the tent roof, you need to call your siblings. David looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. Mom, I can't live like this forever. Son, I'm 72 years old. I need proper care. But Mom, he sat up, taking my hand. I'll find work. David. I used the tone I'd employed when my children were small, the voice of a mother who'd weathered many storms. Sometimes, loving someone means knowing when to ask for help. That night, David took out his old phone and began making a list. Helen in New York, Michael in Chicago, Sarah in Atlanta, Bobby in Denver. All children I love dearly, but people I hadn't seen face-to-face in years. Except for annual holiday calls and a few Christmas cards, I lay on my sleeping bag, listening to David's steady breathing beside me, and wondered if I was ready to become a burden to my children. For the first time in my life, I felt truly old, not just in years, but in helplessness, in dependence on others. But then I remembered the forget-me-nots. Even when trampled, they could sprout again from tiny seeds. Maybe I could too. David's first call was to Helen, my eldest daughter. It was 10 o'clock at night in Hawaii, but 1 in the morning in New York, the time Helen usually stayed up preparing for court hearings. Helen, David said, his voice shaking. Can you talk? I sat beside David, hearing Helen's voice through the phone speaker. My daughter's voice was steel hard. As always, David, what's wrong? Is Mom okay? Helen. David recounted the entire Tsunami story about us losing our home, all our possessions, our current situation. There was a long silence. Then Helen said, "Oh my God, why didn't you call me sooner? I didn't want to bother. Don't be ridiculous." David, she's our mother. Helen's voice shifted from cold to genuinely concerned. What does Mom need? Money. A place to stay. How much do you need? I took the phone. Helen, sweetheart. Mom. Helen's voice softened completely. Are you hurt? Do you need to go to the hospital? I'm fine. Daughter, it's just, I don't know what to do next. Helen was quiet for a moment. I knew my daughter was calculating. She always was, always had a plan for everything. Mom, you're coming to New York to live with me. I'll arrange everything. David will put you on a plane this week. But Helen, you have Emma and Jake. I don't want to be a bother. Mom isn't bothering anyone. Family takes care of family. After hanging up, David called Michael in Chicago. My son received the news with similar shock, but a different reaction. Jesus Christ, Michael said. Mom, I'm so sorry. This is unbelievable. Michael, with his software engineer's mind, immediately began asking technical details. How was the insurance? What FEMA support was available? Did we need a lawyer? Listen, Michael finally said, Helen's place might be too cramped for Mom long term. After a few months, Mom can come stay with Jessica and me in Chicago. We've got the guest room. And Jessica's been asking about having Grandma visit more often. I felt warmth hearing Michael mention Jessica, his wife, whom I'd only met a few times at their wedding and the kids' birthdays. But I also felt a twinge of worry. Jessica had lupus, an autoimmune disease that left her frequently exhausted. Would having a mother-in-law living with them make her condition worse? Sarah, my second daughter, responded with tears. Oh, Mama, she cried through the phone. I can't believe this happened to you. Sarah worked as an ICU nurse in Atlanta, accustomed to emergency situations. But when it came to family, she became emotional and vulnerable. Mama, you're always welcome here. The kids would love to have Grandma around. Lisa's about to go to college. She could use some wisdom from you. But Sarah, you work night shifts. I'd be a burden. Don't you ever say that again, Sarah said firmly. You raised 5 kids by yourself after Daddy died. Now it's our turn to take care of you. Finally, there was Bobby, my second youngest son. He was in Denver, having just started his own small electrical company. Mom, Bobby said, his voice full of guilt. I should have been there. I should have visited more often. Bobby always carried the most guilt among my children. Unmarried at 44. He always felt he hadn't succeeded like his siblings. Bullshit. Mom, Bobby said when I mentioned the rotation plan, why don't we just pool our money together and get you a nice place? Or you can live with me permanently. I don't mind sleeping on the couch. Bobby. Son, you live in a studio apartment. Then I'll get a bigger place. Mom, you don't need to be passed around like some burden. After 4 calls, David set up a video conference with all the siblings. I sat in front of David's old laptop, looking at my 5 children's faces in small squares. Helen in her black suit, sitting in her law office under fluorescent lights. Michael in a t-shirt, with tired-looking Jessica beside him. Sarah still in her nurse's uniform. Apparently just off shift, Bobby in a flannel shirt, with his small, dim apartment as backdrop. Okay, Helen said, taking the leadership role as always. We need a plan. Mom can't stay in that emergency shelter forever. I agree, Michael said. But we also need to be realistic about our situations. Sarah nodded. I work night shifts 3 times a week, but Mama would have her own room. And the kids love her. My place is small, Bobby admitted, but I can make it work. I sat silently. listening to my children discuss my life as if I were a piece of furniture needing arrangement. They loved me, I knew that, but this feeling of being divided up made me feel like I was no longer a complete human being. How about this? Helen proposed. 3-month rotations. Mom starts with me in New York, then Michael in Chicago, then Sarah in Atlanta, then Bobby in Denver. That way, no one has to shoulder the entire responsibility. And David, Michael asked. David stays in Hawaii, tries to rebuild his life there, Helen said. He's done enough. I looked at David, seeing the pain in his eyes, the pain of having to hand over his mother to his siblings, the pain of feeling he'd failed at caring for me. Sounds like a plan, Bobby said, though his voice sounded uncertain. Great, Helen said. I'll book Mom's flight to New York for next week. After the video call ended, David and I sat silently in the tent. Outside, other Hilo residents were also preparing for departures, new beginnings, lives rebuilt from ashes. Mom, David finally said, "Do you regret it?" Regret what, son? Having us, all of us having to take care of you now. I turned to look at David, my youngest child whom I loved most, the one who'd been by my side for the past 15 years. David, I said, taking his hand, I never regret having you children, but I regret that now I have to depend on you. And for the first time since the tsunami hit, I cried. Not crying for losing our house or possessions, but crying for losing my independence, for losing the feeling of being a strong mother my children could rely on. The flight from Honolulu to JFK took 9 hours. I sat by the window, looking down at the vast Pacific, thinking about the last time I'd left Hawaii. That was in 1995, when my husband had cancer and we had to fly to San Francisco for treatment. He never came home again. Now, nearly 30 years later, I was leaving again. But this time, I didn't know when I'd return. Helen met me at JFK with a sleek black Mercedes and a forced smile. My eldest daughter, now 50 years old, still looked beautiful and elegant as always, but I could see new lines around her eyes, signs of stress and work pressure. Mom, Helen hugged me, and I smelled her familiar Chanel perfume. You look tired. How was the flight? Long, I said in Vietnamese, then switched to English. Long, but I'm here now. On the drive from the airport to Manhattan, Helen told me about life in New York. Emma, my granddaughter, was in her senior year of high school preparing for college applications. Jake, my grandson, was in his difficult freshman year of high school. They're excited to see you, Helen said, though her voice sounded uncertain. It's been a while since you visited. Helen's apartment on the Upper East Side was truly impressive. The 20th floor of a luxury building, with a view overlooking Central Park. Everything was white and gray, minimalist and refined, without a single unnecessary item. This is beautiful. Helen, I said, setting my old suitcase on the polished wooden floor. Thanks. I'll show you to your room. My room in Chicago was Helen's former home office. A single bed was placed in the corner, next to a small desk and closet. Through the window, I could see skyscrapers and the neon lights of the city that never sleeps. Emma and Jake appeared at the bedroom door. Emma was tall and thin like her mother, with long brown hair and intelligent eyes. Jake was shorter, with a still childish face and the shyness of adolescence. Hi, Grandma, Emma said, stepping forward to hug me. I'm sorry about what happened in Hawaii. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, hugging my granddaughter tight. She smelled of green apple shampoo and textbooks. Jake stayed back, just waving. Hey, Grandma. Jake, I called. Come here. Let Grandma look at you. The boy approached reluctantly. I could see he was much taller than the last time I'd seen him. And his voice had changed, too. You're so handsome, I said, stroking his hair, just like your grandfather. Jake smiled, his face reddening. The first days in New York passed in strangeness. Helen left for work early and returned late. Emma and Jake both had busy schedules with school and extracurricular activities. I was often alone at home, watching TV or reading, feeling like an uninvited guest. Helen hired Rosa, a Mexican housekeeper, to care for me when she wasn't home. Rosa was kind and attentive, but we communicated mainly through gestures and smiles, as her English wasn't very good either. Mrs. Margaret, Rosa said one day, when I was standing on the balcony looking down at Central Park, "You miss home?" "Yes," I whispered. "I miss my garden. I miss my flowers." Rosa nodded understandingly. "I have plants on roof. You want to see?" We went up to the rooftop, where Rosa had a small garden with herb and flower pots. Not forget-me-nots, but enough to make me feel closer to nature. "You can help," Rosa said. Good for heart. I began helping Rosa care for the rooftop garden. This work gave me purpose, a reason to wake up each morning. But Helen wasn't pleased. "Mom," she said one evening, seeing I had soil under my fingernails, "Rosa is paid to take care of the plants. You don't need to do that." "But Helen, I like gardening. But what if you fall? What if you get hurt? I can't have that liability." Liability. Legal responsibility. My daughter spoke about me as if I were a risk that needed managing. The worst incident happened in the 6th week. I was trying to make coffee in the kitchen when I accidentally spilled water on Helen's MacBook that was sitting on the counter. The laptop screen immediately went black. "Oh no, oh no," I stammered, trying to dry the laptop with paper towels. Helen came home early that day and discovered the disaster. "Mom," she screamed. "What happened?" "Helen, I'm sorry. I was just trying to make coffee and do you know how much work I had on that laptop? Do you know I have a court hearing tomorrow morning?" Helen's voice was ice cold. I'd heard her use this tone with courtroom opponents, but never with me. "I'll pay for it." "With what money?" "Mom, you don't have any money. That's why you're here." That statement hit like a slap. I stood there in my daughter's luxurious kitchen, feeling small and useless. Emma appeared at the kitchen door. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing," Helen said, but her voice was still tense. "Grandma just had a little accident." "It's okay." "Grandma," Emma said, hugging me. "Mom has everything backed up on the cloud anyway." That night, I lay on the single bed in the small room, hearing Helen talking on the phone with Michael. "I can't do this anymore," she said. She's not the same mom we grew up with. She's fragile, and I'm always worried about her getting hurt or breaking something. It's only been 2 months. Helen, it feels like 2 years. And the kids, they're being polite, but I can tell they feel awkward too. This isn't working. Just 1 more month, then she'll come here. Thank God. Helen sighed. "I love Mom, but I'm not cut out for this caregiver thing." I lay there in the darkness and felt something inside me die. Not because Helen didn't love me. I knew she did. But her love had conditions, had limits, and I had exceeded those limits. The next morning, I woke with a clear decision in my mind. I would try my best not to bother Helen anymore. I would speak less, move less, exist less. But living that way, I felt myself slowly disappearing. Like the forget-me-nots I'd lost in the tsunami they had existed, had been beautiful, but now were only memories. Michael met me at Midway Airport with a warm smile and a tight hug. My second son looked different from 3 months ago on the video call. He was thinner, had new gray hairs at his temples, but his eyes were still as gentle as when he was little. "Mom," he said, his voice slightly choked. "I missed you so much. I missed you too." "Son," I said, feeling the tension from New York beginning to dissolve. Michael always had the ability to make me feel peaceful, ever since he was a curly-haired boy who would hug me tight whenever he was scared. On the drive home to Schaumburg, Michael told me about Jessica and Alex. Jessica was going through a difficult period with her lupus, more tired than usual. Alex, their 8-year-old son, was very excited to meet his grandmother. "He's been asking about you every day since we confirmed you're coming," Michael said, driving through Chicago's suburban streets with their spacious yards. "He wants to learn how to cook pho from you." Michael and Jessica's house was a modest one-story ranch, not as luxurious as Helen's apartment, but it felt like a real family actually lived there. There were Alex's toys scattered in the front yard, small flower pots by the windows, and laughter echoing from inside the house. Jessica came out to greet me at the front door. She looked tired, but her smile was genuine and warm. "Mom," she said, which surprised me because Jessica had always called me Margaret before. "Welcome home." Home. That word made my heart beat faster. Alex ran out from the living room like a small tornado, with brown curly hair just like Michael as a child, his face full of excitement. "Grandma, Grandma," the boy shouted, jumping into my arms. "I missed you. Will you tell me stories about Hawaii? Will you teach me to surf?" "Whoa, buddy." Michael laughed. "Let Grandma settle in first." My room in Chicago was a second living room they'd converted into a temporary bedroom. It had a comfortable queen-size bed, a closet, and most importantly, a large window overlooking the backyard where Jessica grew a small vegetable garden. "I know it's not as fancy as Helen's place," Michael said, looking worried. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. Absolutely perfect. The first days in Chicago were completely different from New York. Michael worked from home 3 days a week, so he was often around. Jessica, despite being tired from her illness, still tried to make me feel comfortable. And Alex was like a little ray of sunshine in my life. "Grandma," the boy said on the second day, "Mom said you used to have a garden in Hawaii. Do you want to help me and Mom with our garden?" Their backyard garden was small but carefully tended. Jessica grew tomatoes, cucumbers, and various herbs. I knelt down beside Alex, teaching the boy how to pick off bugs without harming the plants. "Why do we have to be gentle with the plants, Grandma?" Alex asked. "Because they're living things, just like us," I explained. "They need love and care to grow strong, like you need love and care too." The boy's innocent question made me pause. "Yes, sweetheart." Just like that. Every afternoon, when Alex came home from school and Michael finished work, we cooked together. I taught Alex how to make spring rolls, how to mix fish sauce, dipping sauce, how to cut vegetables really thin. Jessica sat at the kitchen counter, watching us and smiling. "You're so good with him," she said one day. "I can see where Michael gets his patience from." But not everything was perfect. Jessica had bad days with her lupus, when she was too tired to get out of bed. On those days, I took over cooking and caring for Alex, while Michael worried anxiously between wife, child, and Mom, Michael said one evening, after Jessica had gone to bed early from exhaustion. "I'm sorry if you're not getting the attention you deserve." "Michael," I said, sitting beside him on the sofa, "don't apologize for taking care of your wife. That's what a good husband does. But you're my mother. I should be taking care of you, too. You are, son, by letting me feel useful here, by letting me help with Alex, by letting me be part of your family, you are taking care of me." He looked at me with grateful eyes. "I love you, Mom. I love you, too." But I also realized that my presence was creating additional stress for this small family. I saw Michael staying up later, worrying more. I saw Jessica trying to hide her exhaustion so I wouldn't feel guilty. I saw Alex sometimes confused when his mother couldn't play because she needed to rest. One night, I heard Michael and Jessica talking in their bedroom. I feel terrible. Jessica said, "Your mom is so sweet, and she helps so much with Alex. But I feel like I can't even rest in my own house without feeling guilty." "You don't have anything to feel guilty about." Michael replied, "You're sick. You need to rest." "But she's your mom. Mike, she lost everything. And here I am, complaining about having her here." "You're not complaining. You're being honest about your limits. That's okay. Is it? Sometimes I feel like the worst daughter-in-law ever. I lay on my bed, listening to this conversation, and felt my heart ache. Jessica wasn't a bad person. She was just a young woman fighting illness, trying to raise a child and support her husband, and now having to care for her mother-in-law too. The next day, when Michael was at work and Alex was at school, I sat beside Jessica, who was resting on the sofa. "Jessica," I said, "we need to talk." She looked at me with worried eyes. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. But I want you to know it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to need space." Jessica's eyes reddened. "I don't want you to think I don't want you here." "I don't think that," I said, taking her hand. "But I also don't want my presence to make your life harder." "You don't," she said quickly. "You help so much with Alex, and Michael is happier when you're here. And, Jessica," I used a gentle but firm tone, "listen to me. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your health. Take care of yourself first." She cried, and I held her like I would one of my own daughters. When my time in Chicago was ending, Alex became sad. "Why do you have to go?" "Grandma," the boy asked. "Well, we were harvesting the last tomatoes of the season because Aunt Sarah and Uncle Bobby also want time with Grandma," I explained. "But I want you to stay here forever." "Someday," I said, not knowing if that would be true. "Someday, Grandma will find a place to stay long-term. Promise." I looked down at my grandson's innocent face and couldn't lie. Grandma promises to try. On the last night in Chicago, the whole family gathered in the living room. Alex fell asleep in my lap. Michael and Jessica held hands on the sofa, and for the first time in many months, I felt like I was truly home. But I also knew this feeling couldn't last forever. I was becoming part of their lives, but also changing the balance of this small family, and that wasn't fair to anyone. Sarah met me at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, still wearing her nurse's uniform and with tired eyes after a night shift. "Mama," she said, hugging me tight. "I'm so sorry I'm still in scrubs. I came straight from the hospital. It's okay. Baby girl," I said, smelling the disinfectant and exhaustion on my daughter's body. Sarah had always been the child I worried about most, too dedicated, too self-sacrificing. On the drive home to Decatur, Sarah told me about her 3 children. Lisa, 17, about to graduate high school and prepare for college. Mark, 15, in his difficult adolescent phase. Sophie, 12, dreamy and loved drawing. "They're good kids," Sarah said, but her voice sounded tired. "But sometimes I feel like I'm failing as a single mom, working night shifts, always tired, never enough time." "Sarah," I said, "you're doing your best. That's all anyone can ask for." Sarah's house was a small 3-bedroom ranch. Not fancy like Helen's or cozy like Michael's, but it felt like a family trying their best to survive. There were piles of unfolded laundry on the sofa, unwashed dishes in the sink, and a to-do list in Sarah's handwriting stuck to the refrigerator. My 3 grandchildren welcomed me with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Lisa, a tall and beautiful girl with long black hair, hugged me politely but seemed distant. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Sorry, the house is a mess. Mom's been working extra shifts." Mark, with messy brown hair and an acne-covered face typical of adolescence, just waved from afar. "Hey." But Sophie, the youngest with big round eyes and a toothy grin, ran straight into my arms. "Grandma, I drew you a picture," the girl said, handing me a paper with a drawing of an old woman watering flowers. "Mom told me you used to have a garden. It's beautiful." "Sweetheart," I said, and I meant it, "can you show me more of your drawings?" My room was Sophie's room, which she'd moved to share with Lisa. I felt guilty seeing Sophie having to sleep on the top bunk, giving up her bed for me. "Sophie, sweetheart," I said, "you don't have to give up your room for me. It's okay. Grandma..." The girl said, "I like sleeping with Lisa. She tells me stories before bed." The first days in Atlanta, I quickly realized the pattern of life here. Sarah worked 3 nights a week, from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. on those nights. I took primary responsibility for caring for the 3 grandchildren. Lisa usually managed herself. But I still had to make sure Mark did his homework and Sophie went to bed on time. "Grandma," Mark complained one evening when I reminded him to do his math homework. "Mom never makes me do homework this early." "That's because Mom comes home at 8 a.m. and is too tired to check your work," I said gently but firmly. "But I'm here now, so we do homework at 7 p.m. Gradually, we established a routine. I cooked dinner for the kids, helped them with homework, and told Sophie stories before bedtime. On nights Sarah worked, I slept on the sofa so I could hear if the grandchildren needed anything. Sophie became the grandchild closest to me. Every afternoon after school, she sat beside me at the kitchen table, drawing while I prepared dinner. "Grandma," she asked one day, "why are you sad sometimes? What makes you think Grandma is sad?" "Because you look out the window a lot, and you have the same look that Mom has when she misses Daddy." Sophie's emotional intelligence surprised me. "Sometimes, Grandma misses home," I admitted. "But this is your home now." "No, sweetheart. This is Aunt Sarah's home. Grandma is just visiting." "But where is Grandma's home then?" That was a question I had no answer for. One evening, Sarah came home from her shift to face an emergency situation. Mark had gotten into a fight with a classmate and was suspended for a day. Lisa was stressed about college applications. Sophie had a mild fever. "I can't do this," Sarah cried, sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. "I can't be everything to everyone." I sat beside her, placing my hand on my daughter's shoulder. "You don't have to be everything. Sarah, let me help." "But Mama, you're supposed to be the one being taken care of, not the other way around." "Says who?" I asked. "Maybe taking care of others is how I take care of myself." We sat quietly for a while. Then Sarah said, "I feel like such a failure as a mother." "Sarah Elizabeth Williams," I said, using her full name like when she was little. "Don't you ever say that again? Look at your children. Lisa is smart and responsible. Mark is a good kid going through normal teenage stuff. Sophie is creative and loving. You did that. You raised them, with a lot of help from others. Every mother needs help. That doesn't make you a failure. That makes you human." In the last week in Atlanta, I decided to use my meager savings to buy groceries for the family. Sarah discovered it when she saw the receipt. "Mama," she cried, "you can't spend your money on us. It's my money to spend," I said stubbornly. "And I want to spend it on my grandchildren. But what if you need it later?" "Then I'll figure it out later." Sarah hugged me and cried, "I love you so much." "Mama, I wish things were different. Things are exactly as they should be," I said, though in my heart, I didn't entirely believe it. For the last month of the first cycle, I went to Denver with Bobby. He met me at the airport with his old pickup truck and a nervous smile. "Mom," he said, hugging me, "I hope you won't mind the place. It's not much, but I tried to make it comfortable for you." Bobby's studio apartment in downtown Denver had been renovated into a small 1-bedroom apartment. He'd installed a partition wall to create privacy for me and bought a new queen-size bed. He slept on the futon sofa in the living area. "Bobby," I said, looking around the small apartment, "you didn't have to do all this." "Of course I did," he said. "You're my mom." Bobby worked as an electrical contractor, and his small company was going through difficult times. He often had to travel far for jobs, but during the 3 months I was there, he turned down all distant contracts to stay home with me. "Bobby," I said one day, when I saw him decline a job in Colorado Springs, "you don't have to turn down work because of me." "Yes, I do," he said stubbornly. "The other kids had their time with you while still living their normal lives. It's my turn now." But I could see the stress on his face. Bills piling up, bank account getting lower, and the pressure of caring for his mother that he didn't want to admit. We spent the days in Denver exploring the city. Bobby took me hiking very easy trails, visiting museums, and eating at restaurants he couldn't afford, but still wanted to treat me too. "Bobby," I said one evening, seeing him quietly calculating bills, "what's wrong with your business?" He looked up from his laptop. "Nothing's wrong. Mom, just normal startup challenges. Don't lie to your mother." He sighed. "It's tough right now. The market is competitive, and I'm still building my reputation, taking 3 months off to be with you. It's hurt my cash flow." "Then why did you do it?" "Because you're more important than money." That statement made my heart both warm and ache. "Bobby, honey, I don't want to be the reason your business fails." "You're not," he said quickly. "I'll figure it out." But I knew he was lying. I saw the unpaid bills on the counter. I saw him eating ramen noodles for lunch to save money for nicer meals when eating with me. I saw the stress lines around his eyes getting deeper each day. At the end of December, when we were preparing for me to return to New York to start the second cycle, Bobby broke down. "I don't want you to go," he said, sitting on his futon with his head in his hands. "I know I can't take care of you the way Helen or Michael can, but I love having you here. For the first time in my life, I feel like I have a real family." I sat beside my youngest son, placing my hand on his back. "Bobby, you are a wonderful son, and you have taken better care of me than anyone." "Then stay," he said desperately. "We'll make it work. I'll get a bigger place, find more work, and sacrifice your future for an old woman." "You're not just an old woman. You're my mother." That night, I lay on the bed that Bobby had spent his savings to buy and realized something that had been gradually building in my heart throughout the year. My children's love was real, was deep, but it was also destroying both them and me. Helen stressed and resentful. Michael torn between wife and mother. Sarah exhausted and guilty. Bobby sacrificing his future. And me, I was becoming exactly what I never wanted to be. A burden in the darkness of Denver, with snow beginning to fall outside and Bobby snoring softly on the futon. I made a decision that would change everything. I would not return to New York. I would not continue this cycle. I would find a way to free my children from the obligation they felt toward me, even when that obligation came from love. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is knowing when to let go. In January 2025, instead of boarding the flight back to New York as planned, I disappeared. I left a letter for Bobby. "My dearest son, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Don't worry about me. I'm not doing anything foolish. I'm just going to find a place where I can live without making your lives more complicated. You have all sacrificed too much for me already." Helen gave up her privacy and peace of mind. Michael was torn between his wife and me. Sarah exhausted herself juggling everything. And you, Bobby, you're destroying your future because of me. This isn't fair to anyone. I love you all too much to watch you destroy yourselves out of a sense of duty. I will be okay. I have some money and a plan. Don't look for me. When I'm ready, I'll be in touch. Love always. Mom, I had planned this carefully during the final weeks in Denver when Bobby went to work. I researched online about assisted living facilities and retirement communities. I needed a place that accepted Medicaid and Social Security, was far enough away that my children couldn't easily find me, had garden space, treated residents like humans, not just patients. After many calls and research, I found Sunset Gardens in Salem, Oregon, a small, family-owned assisted living facility with a good reputation and ample garden space. Most importantly, they had availability and were willing to accept my situation. I left Denver in the early morning. Before Bobby woke up, I caught a bus to the bus station, then took a Greyhound bus to Oregon, 48 hours of traveling, with stops in Utah and Idaho, carrying only a suitcase and a small backpack. When I arrived at Sunset Gardens, I registered under the name Margaret Chen, my maiden name, I told them I had no family, no emergency contacts. I paid the first month's rent with cash from my savings account that I had gradually withdrawn over the past months. The facility was small and modest, 40 residents, most of whom already had family issues or no family at all. The staff was friendly, but not intrusive. And most importantly, there was a garden area that residents were allowed to use. My room was small but adequate. A single bed, small dresser, a chair, and a window overlooking the courtyard. Simple and clean. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. Meanwhile, chaos exploded in my family. Bobby discovered my absence when he woke up to prepare breakfast for me. He immediately called Helen, Michael, Sarah, and David. Panic ensued. "What do you mean she's gone?" Helen screamed through the phone. "I mean, she's not here," Bobby said, crying. She left a note saying she went to find her own place. "Did you call the police?" Michael asked. "They said adults have the right to disappear if they want to. It's not a missing person case unless there's evidence of foul play." Helen immediately flew to Denver. Sarah took time off work. Michael used his tech skills to try tracing my movements. David flew from Hawaii. For 3 months, they searched everywhere. They hired a private investigator, checked hospitals, morgues, other family members, friends from Hawaii. They posted on social media, hoping someone would recognize me. They contacted the Salvation Army, homeless shelters, every assisted living facility they could think of. But I had been careful. I used cash for everything, avoided cameras when possible, chose a name that wouldn't easily connect to them, and Oregon was far enough from their normal search radius. Meanwhile, at Sunset Gardens, I slowly began to rebuild a version of life. My first week, I mostly stayed in my room, grieving. Not grieving my old life, but grieving the pain I knew I was causing my children. I could imagine their worry, their guilt, their frantic searching. Part of me wanted to call them immediately and end their suffering. But then I met Dorothy Washington, 80 years old, former elementary school teacher, sharp as a tack. She knocked on my door on the 3rd day. "Honey," she said, "you can't stay holed up in here forever. Come have lunch with me and Frank." Frank Morrison, 75, retired Navy, with a prosthetic leg and stories that could fill books. Dorothy and Frank had become friends at the facility, both dealing with families that couldn't or wouldn't take care of them. "Your family dump you too?" Frank asked bluntly over cafeteria meatloaf. "It's complicated." I said, "It always is," Dorothy said gently. "But you're here now. That's what matters." Slowly, I began to tell them my story. Not the whole truth, I couldn't risk them contacting my family, but enough truth that they understood I was running from love, not from abandonment. "That's the hardest kind of running," Dorothy said. "Running from people who love you wrong." "They don't love me wrong," I protested. They love you like you're their responsibility instead of their choice." Frank finished. "Been there. Week by week. I integrated into the small community at Sunset Gardens. I helped in the kitchen sometimes, joined the book club Dorothy ran, listened to Frank's Navy stories. But mostly, I gravitated toward the garden. The facility's garden was neglected, just some overgrown rose bushes and weedy flower beds. The director, Miss Patterson, mentioned they'd love to improve it, but didn't have the budget for landscaping. What if residents maintained it ourselves? I suggested during a community meeting. That would be wonderful. "Margaret," she said, "do you have gardening experience?" "A little," I said, which was an understatement. I started small, just cleaning up one corner of the garden, pulling weeds, preparing soil. Other residents began to notice and offer help. Soon we had a small but enthusiastic gardening group. Me, Dorothy, Frank, and 3 others. But what I really wanted to plant were forget-me-nots. I had carried some seeds with me from Hawaii, the only things I'd managed to save from my old garden. In the emergency shelter, I'd found them in the pocket of a jacket, forgotten until I was packing for New York. I'd carried them through every move, every transition, like talismans. In early April, when the Oregon spring was gentle and promising, I finally planted them in a corner of the garden that got morning sun and afternoon shade, just like in Hawaii, but different climate, different soil, different life. "What are those?" Dorothy asked, watching me carefully place each tiny seed. "Forget-me-nots." I said. "They were my specialty back home." "Pretty name," Frank said. "What's the story behind it?" I told them the legend about the medieval knight who drowned trying to pick the flowers for his love, calling out, "Forget-me-not," as the water took him. How the flowers became symbols of true love and remembrance. "But I think they mean something else, too," I added, patting soil gently over the seeds. "They mean beginning again, remembering where you came from, but not being trapped by it." As spring turned to early summer, my little corner began to transform. The forget-me-nots germinated and grew, their delicate blue flowers creating a carpet of color. Other residents started requesting plants for their own sections. The garden became a gathering place, a source of pride. I was happier than I'd been in months. I had purpose again, community, a reason to wake up each morning. The grief over my family was still there, but it was tempered by something I hadn't felt in a long time: independence. That's when Maya Rodriguez showed up. Maya was 22, a recent college graduate making a living as a travel vlogger. She specialized in hidden gems and heartwarming stories, small towns, unique people, places that weren't in typical tourist guides. She'd come to Salem to film a piece about Oregon's covered bridges, but her original interview had fallen through. Driving past Sunset Gardens, she noticed our garden and decided to stop. "Excuse me," she said to me one afternoon as I was deadheading spent blooms. "I'm Maya Rodriguez, and I make travel videos. Your garden is beautiful. Would you mind if I filmed it?" I should have said no. I should have been more careful. But something about Maya's genuine enthusiasm, her respectful manner, made me agree. "What's your story?" she asked, setting up her camera. "How did you create this beautiful space?" I found myself talking about gardening, about the therapeutic value of working with soil and plants, about how gardens can bring communities together. I talked about forget-me-nots and their symbolism, about how flowers teach us about resilience and renewal. "These particular flowers," I said, kneeling beside the blue carpet I'd created, "they remind us that memory doesn't have to be a chain that holds us back. It can be a seed that helps us grow something new." Maya's eyes lit up. "That's beautiful. Can you tell me more about what that means to you?" I talked about starting over, about how sometimes love means letting go, about finding home in unexpected places. I talked about the other residents, about Dorothy and Frank, about building family from friendship. What I didn't realize was that Maya's video would go viral. She titled it The Forget-Me-Not Garden, a story of new beginnings. It was 15 minutes long, beautifully edited, showing the garden, the facility, and several residents talking about their experiences. I was featured prominently, talking about the flowers and their meaning. The video was uploaded on a Tuesday in mid-July. By Friday, it had 2 million views. Comments poured in. "This made me cry. What a beautiful woman and story. I want to visit this garden. Does anyone know more about the lady with the flowers? She seems so wise. Goals for my own aging." This woman found peace. Maya was thrilled with the response and reached out to ask if she could do a follow-up video. But I was beginning to worry. 2 million people had seen my face, heard my voice, learned about Sunset Gardens. It was only a matter of time. That time came on a Saturday morning in late July. I was in the garden, watering the forget-me-nots, when Mrs. Patterson came running out to find me. "Margaret," she said, breathless. "Margaret, there's a young woman here looking for you. She says she's your granddaughter." My blood went cold. What does she look like? Young, maybe 18, long dark hair, very pretty. She's crying. Lisa, Sarah's oldest daughter. I followed Mrs. Patterson inside, my heart pounding. In the lobby stood Lisa, older than when I'd seen her in Atlanta, holding a phone with Maya's video paused on my face. "Grandma," she said, and burst into tears. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she ran to me, and I held her while she sobbed. "We've been looking everywhere," she cried. "Everyone's been so worried. Mom has barely slept. Uncle Bobby blames himself. Aunt Helen hired detectives. We thought something terrible had happened to you." "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my own tears starting. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Why?" she asked, pulling back to look at me. "Why did you leave? Don't you know how much we love you? That's exactly why I left," I said softly. She looked confused. So I led her to a quiet corner of the lobby and tried to explain about feeling like a burden, about watching my children sacrifice their own happiness and health, about wanting them to live their own lives without guilt. "But Grandma," Lisa said, "that's not your choice to make. We wanted to take care of you. I know you did, baby. But wanting to and being able to are different things. And I didn't want your love for me to destroy your lives." Lisa called Sarah first, then the others, within hours. My phone, which I'd kept but never used, was buzzing with calls and texts. By evening, all 5 of my children were on their way to Oregon. I spent that night in my small room, knowing it would be my last night of the independence I'd fought so hard to create. Tomorrow, my family would arrive, and everything would change again. But as I looked out my window at the forget-me-not garden glowing in the moonlight, I realized something important. I wasn't the same woman who had left Denver 6 months ago. I had proven to myself that I could survive alone, that I could create meaning and purpose and community. I had value beyond being someone's mother or grandmother. That knowledge would change everything about what happened next. They arrived throughout Sunday like storm clouds gathering Helen first, flying red-eye from New York with her efficient fury and expensive luggage. Michael and Jessica, who insisted on coming despite her lupus flare from Chicago with little Alex in tow. Sarah from Atlanta, looking thinner and more exhausted than I'd ever seen her. Bobby from Denver, carrying guilt like a physical weight. And David, my youngest, flying in from Hawaii, where he'd been rebuilding his life piece by piece. I met them in the garden. It seemed fitting, this place I'd created, this symbol of new growth and different kinds of love. I was kneeling among the forget-me-nots when I heard Helen's voice behind me. "Mom," I turned around slowly, still on my knees in the dirt, and saw all 5 of my children standing there. Helen in her power suit, looking out of place among the flowers. Michael with his arm around Jessica, who looked pale but determined. Sarah with tears already streaming down her face. Bobby with his shoulders hunched like he expected to be hit. David hanging back, uncertain. For a long moment, no one spoke. We just looked at each other across the space of 6 months and a lifetime of misunderstanding. Then Helen said, in a voice that cracked with emotion she usually kept hidden, "Do you have any idea what you put us through?" "Yes," I said simply, rising to my feet and brushing dirt from my hands. "I do." "We thought you were dead," Sarah sobbed. We imagined horrible things. I know, and I'm sorry for that pain, but I'm not sorry for leaving." The words hit them like physical blows. I saw Bobby flinch, Helen's face hardening. Michael stepped protectively closer to Jessica. "How can you say that?" Helen demanded. "How can you say you're not sorry for abandoning your family?" "Because," I said, looking each of them in the eye, "I didn't abandon you. I set you free. That wasn't your choice to make," Michael said, and I heard an echo of Lisa's words from the day before. Wasn't it? I asked. Whose life is it? Michael. Whose choice should it be? We stood there in the garden, surrounded by the community I'd built and the flowers I'd grown, and had the conversation we should have had a year ago. I told them about Helen's apartment, how I'd felt like an unwelcome intrusion in her carefully controlled life, about Chicago, where my presence had added stress to Jessica's illness and Michael's already overwhelming responsibilities, about Atlanta, where Sarah was killing herself, trying to be everything to everyone, about Denver, where Bobby was sacrificing his future for duty disguised as love. You all loved me, I said, but you loved me like an obligation, like something you had to carry instead of something you chose to embrace. That's not true. David protested. We wanted you with us. You wanted to do right by me. I corrected. There's a difference. Helen sat down heavily on one of the garden benches Dorothy and Frank had helped me install. For the first time since her father died, my daughter looked vulnerable. So what were we supposed to do? She asked. Just let you figure it out on your own. Let you end up in some random nursing home. Look around you, I said, gesturing to the garden, to the facility beyond. Is this some random nursing home? Or is this a place where I've found purpose and community and independence? Sarah wiped her eyes. But we missed you. The kids missed you. Alex still talks about wanting to cook with Grandma, and I missed all of you, I said, my voice breaking a little, every single day. But missing someone and needing someone aren't the same thing. Jessica, who had been quiet until now, spoke up in her soft voice. What if we had done things differently? What if we had asked you what you wanted instead of deciding what you needed? I looked at my daughter-in-law with new appreciation, even sick, even tired. Jessica had gotten to the heart of it. What do you want, Mom? Michael asked. Right now, today, what do you actually want? For the first time in the conversation, I smiled. I want to show you something. I led them on a tour of Sunset Gardens. I introduced them to Dorothy, who charmed them with her sharp wit and obvious affection for me, to Frank, who told them embarrassing stories about my learning to use a smartphone, to Mrs. Patterson, who spoke about my leadership in the gardening program and my role in improving community morale. Your mother has been a gift to us. Mrs. Patterson told them. She arrived quiet and sad, but she's bloomed here, just like her flowers. I showed them my room, small but mine, organized how I liked it, decorated with photos I'd asked Lisa to print from Facebook of all my grandchildren. I showed them the schedule I kept. Garden maintenance, book club, helping in the kitchen, volunteering with the activity program. This is my life. I told them, not the life you would choose for me, maybe, but the life I chose for myself. We had dinner in the facility's dining room. Alex, bless him, immediately made friends with Frank and spent the meal asking about Navy ships and adventures. The other residents welcomed my family warmly, sharing stories about me that surprised my children. She taught me to make spring rolls. One woman told Sarah, I never thought I'd learn something new at 85. She started a letter writing program. Another resident told Helen, helps those of us with shaky hands stay in touch with family. After dinner, we walked through the garden as the sun set. The forget-me-nots glowed blue in the twilight, and I could see my children beginning to understand something they hadn't before. It's beautiful. Mom, David said quietly, you did this. We did this. I corrected. Community effort. But you started it. Sometimes, I said, starting something is enough. That night, my children got hotel rooms in Salem, but we gathered again in the garden the next morning. This time, the conversation was different. We want to understand, Helen said. Help us understand how to love you the way you need to be loved. It was the first time I'd heard Helen admit she might not know everything. You love me by letting me make my own choices, I said, even when they're not The choices you would make? What if your choices are wrong? Bobby asked. What if something happens to you here? Then something happens, I said gently. Bobby, something was going to happen to me wherever I was. Age doesn't stop because you're surrounded by family, but we want to be part of your life, Sarah said. How do we do that if you're here and we're scattered everywhere? You visit when you can, not when you feel obligated. You call because you want to hear my voice, not because it's Sunday and that's when you call Mom. You include me in your lives by sharing what's happening, not by making your lives smaller to fit me in. Michael nodded slowly. So instead of us taking turns caring for you, you want us to take turns visiting you. If you want to visit, I said, if it fits your life, if it brings you joy instead of stress, Jessica spoke up again. What about holidays? Family events? Sometimes I'll come if I can and want to. Sometimes you'll come here. Sometimes we'll celebrate apart and share pictures. Family doesn't have to mean everyone in the same place at the same time. Over the next 3 days, we worked out a new kind of relationship. Helen arranged for a lawyer to help me get my finances in order and ensure Sunset Gardens could be my permanent address. Michael set up video calling so I could attend family events virtually when I wanted to. Sarah brought her kids to meet Dorothy and Frank. And Sophie immediately bonded with Frank over his ship stories. Bobby helped me improve the garden's irrigation system and promised to come back in the spring with more tools and materials. David planned to visit for a week at Christmas. To learn about my new life, I have one more thing to show you, I said on their last morning. I led them to a new section of the garden. I'd been developing a memorial area with plants that held special meaning. The centerpiece was a large patch of forget-me-nots, but I'd added other flowers too. Plumeria from Hawaii for their father, roses for Helen's wedding bouquet, sunflowers because Michael had loved them as a child, daisies for Sarah's first garden, marigolds for Bobby's birth month. It's a remembering garden. I explained, not just for people who died, but for all the versions of ourselves and our family that we've been. The young mother I was, the children you were, the family we used to be. We can remember and honor all of that without being trapped by it. I looked at each of my children, Helen trying not to cry and failing. Michael holding Jessica's hand tightly, Sarah openly weeping, Bobby staring at the marigolds, David with his arm around me. This is what the forget-me-nots taught me, I said. Memory isn't about clinging to the past. It's about carrying the best of what was into whatever comes next. Helen was the first to speak. I'm sorry. Mom, I'm sorry I made you feel like a burden. I'm sorry I didn't ask what you wanted. I'm sorry too, Michael said. I thought love meant never letting go. I'm sorry I was too tired to see you were tired too, Sarah added. I'm sorry I tried to fix everything and ended up breaking it worse, Bobby said. David just hugged me tighter. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from needing to protect yourself. Don't be sorry, I told them. Be different, be better, but don't be sorry. 6 months later, I'm still at Sunset Gardens. Dorothy and Frank have become the family I live with daily, while my children have become the family I choose to connect with regularly. Helen calls every Sunday, not from obligation, but because she likes hearing about my garden and my new friends. Michael brings his family to visit every few months, and Alex has appointed himself my assistant garden designer. Sarah sends me pictures of her kids constantly, and Sophie mails me drawings that I display proudly in my room. Bobby comes for long weekends and has helped me expand the garden into a small teaching space where I offer workshops to the community. David visited for Christmas and stayed for New Year's. And we talked about his plans to maybe relocate to Oregon in a few years, not to take care of me, but because he likes what he sees of my new life. Maya's follow-up video, 1 year later. The Forget-Me-Not Garden Family Reunion has been viewed over 5 million times. It features interviews with all of us about what we learned and how we changed. The comments are full of people saying it helped them rethink their own family dynamics, their own assumptions about aging and independence and love. This morning, I was in the garden early, deadheading the last of the summer flowers and preparing beds for fall planting. Frank joined me, as he does most mornings, bringing coffee and commentary. "Regrets?" he asked, as he often does. "About leaving?" I shook my head. "Never! About anything." I considered this, watching the morning sun catch the dew on the forget-me-not leaves. I regret that it took me 73 years to learn that love doesn't mean sacrifice. I regret that I raised my children to think taking care of family meant giving up themselves. But I don't regret teaching them better late than never. Dorothy appeared with her own coffee and the day's activity schedule. "What are we philosophizing about this morning?" "The meaning of life," Frank said dramatically. "Oh, that," Dorothy laughed. "It's simple. The meaning of life is to live it, on your own terms, with people you choose, doing things that matter to you. Everything else is just details." I looked at my chosen family, at the garden we'd built together, at the life I'd created from scratch at an age when most people think creating is over. I thought about my children, living their own lives with less guilt and more intention. I thought about my grandchildren, growing up with a different model of what it means to age with dignity and independence. And I thought about the forget-me-nots, which will go dormant this winter, but will return in spring, as they always do, changed by the seasons, adapted to new conditions, but essentially themselves still blue, still beautiful, still carrying the memory of what came before while reaching toward what comes next. That, I realized, was what I'd been trying to teach all along. That love doesn't mean holding on. It means trusting enough to let go, knowing that what's real will find its way back, transformed but unchanged in its essence. The morning was warming up, and other residents were beginning to emerge for breakfast. Soon the garden would be full of people, some here to work, some to sit and think, some just to enjoy the beauty we'd created together. "Come on," I said to Dorothy and Frank. "Let's go see what today brings." As we walked toward the building, I looked back once more at the forget-me-not garden, at this place where I'd learned that sometimes the best way to save a family is to save yourself first, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is disappear until everyone remembers how to choose each other instead of feeling obligated to each other. The flowers nodded in the gentle breeze, their blue faces turned toward the sun, and I could almost hear them saying what they'd been saying all along. "Remember us, but don't forget to live." Epilogue. 2 years later, today is my 75th birthday, and I'm hosting a party in the garden. Not because anyone felt they had to come, but because everyone wanted to be here. Helen flew in with Emma, who's now a sophomore at Columbia studying environmental law, inspired, she says, by her grandmother's garden. Jake, now 16 and taller than his mother, drove himself up from his summer job to surprise me. Michael's whole family came, including Alex, who's now 10 and has become quite the expert on flowers. He's brought his school science project about pollinators to show me Jessica looks healthier than I've seen her in years. And she told me privately that learning to set boundaries with family obligations has helped her manage her condition better. Sarah came with all 3 kids. Lisa, now 19 and in college, brought her boyfriend to meet the family. Mark, 17, has grown into a thoughtful young man who spent an hour this morning helping Frank repair a garden fence. Sophie, 14, has started an art blog where she documents the changes in the garden through drawings and photographs. Bobby drove over from Portland, where he relocated his business last year. He's doing well, has a girlfriend now who loves the garden almost as much as he does. David came up from his new home in Eugene, where he's working as a park ranger. He's thinking about buying a house with a big yard so he can start his own garden. Dorothy and Frank are here too, of course, along with most of the Sunset Gardens community. Mrs. Patterson made a speech about how the garden has become a model for other facilities. Maya came to film an anniversary video and brought her mother, who wants to learn about starting a garden at her own senior community. We're sitting around tables scattered throughout the garden. Eating cake that Alex helped me bake. My specialty now is birthday cakes, made with lavender from our herbs section. The conversation flows between 3 generations and multiple families. Blood family, chosen family, community family, speech, someone calls out, and others take up the chant. I stand up among the forget-me-nots, which are in full bloom, a blue carpet spotted with the other flowers we've added over 2 years. The garden has grown beyond what I could have imagined when I first planted those saved seeds from Hawaii. When I was younger, I thought love meant never letting go. I held on to my children so tightly I was strangling all of us. I thought that's what mothers did, sacrifice everything, control everything, fix everything. The tsunami taught me that some things can't be controlled or fixed. And my children taught me that love without choice isn't really love at all. These flowers, I gesture to the forget-me-nots surrounding us. They taught me the most important lesson. They say, forget-me-not. Wasp, but they don't say, never let me go. Memory and attachment aren't the same thing. So today, on my 75th birthday, surrounded by all the people I love and who love me back, I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me disappear so I could find myself. Thank you for learning that taking care of each other doesn't mean giving up ourselves. Thank you for choosing to be here. Not because you have to, but because you wanna. And thank you for teaching an old woman that it's never too late to bloom where you're planted or to pick up your roots and plant yourself somewhere new if that's what it takes to bloom. The applause starts with Dorothy and Frank and spreads through the gathering. Helen is crying openly now, something she never would have done 3 years ago. Michael has his arm around Jessica and Alex both. Sarah looks peaceful in a way I haven't seen since her husband died. Bobby is grinning like the little boy I remember. David gives me a thumbs up. As the sun sets and people begin to clean up, Alex comes to sit beside me on the bench facing the main flower bed. Grandma, he says, will you teach me how to save seeds? I want to plant forget-me-nots at our house. Of course, sweetheart, I say, putting my arm around him. But remember, you can't just plant them anywhere. You have to choose the right spot. Prepare the soil. Be patient while they grow. Like people, he says seriously. Exactly, like people. We sit there together as the garden settles into evening quiet. 3 generations of the same family, but each of us rooted in our own chosen soil, connected by love that's strong enough to let go, and trust that what matters will always find its way back. In the fading light, the forget-me-nots glow like small stars fallen to earth, carrying their ancient message. Remember, but don't forget to live. And for the first time in my 75 years, I truly understand what that means.